so excited to be able to be here with you guys today. I have a Master's of Arts in Christian Apologetics from Biola, so I am a testimony to their awesome apologetics program. If anybody's interested, definitely go check out their booth afterwards. But how many of you have had any involvement with paganism? Read about it, studied it in school, anything like that? Yeah, sorry. Sorry. All right, how about archaeology? How many of you, has anybody traveled to Israel or studied up on any archaeology about the Bible or anything else? Okay, a few of you. Well, my favorite field in apologetics is archaeology. I started out in personal studies. I've been to Israel twice, once on a Holy Land tour and a second time for an Israelite dig outside the Western Wall Plaza, and so I kind of have a major fascination. And this is a slightly different edge for me. Typically I use it to defend the Bible, but today we're going to use it to illuminate other worldviews. So how does archaeology help us when it comes to worldviews? Well, not only does it help us defend the Bible, but it also, because there is nothing new under the sun, it illuminates some of the things that we're currently experiencing, but from a snapshot of the past. We live in a melting pot today of of cultures, nationalities, all sorts of people group, and as a result, we also live in a melting pot of worldviews and religious ideas, a very pluralistic society. This is not new, it's not unique. This is something that existed in the ancient world. Greece, Rome, Babylon, Mesopotamia, Egypt, they all intermixed, intertraded, interacted, and as a result, they became very pluralistic and had a lot of religious and worldview influence on one another. So we can look at what happened in the past, how the ancient Christians engaged these cultures, and kind of understand what we're dealing with today and how we should engage modern pagans. Paganism is the oldest and most prominent of world religions, and we're going to identify a couple key characteristics today. We're going to look at some of their beliefs, some of their practices, ultimately outline what their worldview is, and then we're going to compare that to the Christian worldview and see how paganism is resurfacing in modern society and how we can engage modern pagans. One word of warning before we start out, some of this stuff might seem a little crazy. It's really easy for us to say, well, how could anyone actually believe this stuff? I want to ask everybody to keep an open mind and remember that most pagans had some sort of spiritual encounter that led them to believe they were interacting with the divine, or they had some sort of situation where the ends appeared to be the result of the means. In other words, they did some magical incantation, sacrificed to a god, and they got whatever it was that they were trying to achieve, and so they attribute it to their cult action. So they have reasons why they are believing within this worldview. This worldview is also attempting to answer some questions about the nature of reality. And so these are not just kind of made up hokey things just for pure amusement. These are things that are attempting to answer the felt needs of the community of the day. So what is a worldview? Just to make sure everyone's oriented, a worldview is the lens through which we view reality. It's kind of the idea of sunglasses or rose-colored glasses. When you put them on, the world is tinted to the color of the lens. The same thing is with a worldview. It's the way we interpret the data that we take in, and it causes the response or reaction that we then put out. There are 6 key questions that help you identify what your or someone else's worldview are. The first being, what is the nature of ultimate reality? Is there a God? What is he like? Are there multiple gods? Is material ultimate? Is the ultimate personal, or is it impersonal? This leads to the question of what is the nature of material reality, the universe, the earth, all of the stuff that Dr. Bloom was talking about yesterday. Is it created? Has it always existed for eternity past? Is it orderly or is it chaotic? Is it subjective or objective? So the definition of the material reality is a key point when talking about the worldview. That leads to, what is a human being? Are we created beings? Are we highly evolved mechanical engines, mechanical biological machines? Every civilization wants to know what has gone wrong. They recognize that the world is not in a perfect state, that it's not ideal, and so they want to know why. Is it the result of random natural chance? This is all that there is, and so ultimately nothing has gone wrong. Or was there some sort of perfection in the past which we have fallen from? Are we dealing with capricious or chaotic gods who cause the chaos of this world? And if something has gone wrong, ultimately you want to know what the solution is. So the majority of worldviews focus on the solution part of the question. They have answers to all the other parts of the question, but they don't necessarily develop them doctrinally in the same sense that they focus on the solution. So do we have solution through the redemption of Jesus Christ as the incarnate God? Or do we need to placate the gods to make sure that they'll stop picking on us? Is there, if material is ultimate, do we even have a solution? Is this all that there is, and as a result, we just need to make the best out of life and kind of live however we want? And this ultimately leads to the question of what happens at death. Everyone in every culture and every civilization throughout all of time dies. That's, sorry to give away the ending. But what happens when we die? Do we cease to exist? Do we go to some place of divine judgment, a heaven or a hell? Is there a vague and ambiguous afterlife that we don't really know what it's going to look like? So these are the 6 questions that comprise someone's worldview. When you're dialoguing with an individual, asking these will kind of help you understand where they fall in their worldview system. We're going to step through these worldview questions in light of paganism and compare them to Christianity. But just to start us out, what is paganism? It comes from the Latin word paganus, which comes from pagus, meaning a village or country district, a rural or rustic place. And it later, as Christianity arose, came to be one who was not enlisted through baptism as a soldier of Christ. So really, there's not a negative or derogative connotation to the word pagan. Pagans are known for their performance of rites or cult acts. They don't necessarily profess any creed or doctrine. They have no strong commitment to revealed belief, such as we do with Scripture in the Christian worldview. And they don't believe in faith. That's not an important part of their system. It was thought in the ancient world that faith was the state of the uneducated. So Christians were considered unenlightened. Oops, sorry, I flipped too much. If you don't have any revealed belief and you don't have any set doctrines, you don't really have a right, so you can't really have a wrong. So the idea of heresy doesn't really exist in paganism. The whole emphasis and focus is on cult action, cult worship, the things that you do. This is why we see in the early church that Christians are implored, if not coerced, into emperor worship and performing in the cult rituals of the pagan day, because it didn't matter whether they believed in Christ. It didn't matter whether they really bought intellectually into the pagan worldview. Action was all that was necessary. You can believe whatever you want to believe when you go home. I think that sounds kind of familiar. Yet, there's one thing that stands out. Action implies intention, which implies motive or purpose. So if you're committing actions, there's a reason you're doing it. And so we're going to analyze the actions and the individuals that they worshipped and the gods that they worshipped to see what do they really believe behind these cult actions. Oops. So how does paganism answer the worldview questions? Well, the first question is, what is the nature of ultimate reality? In the ancient world, the cosmos literally teemed at every level and in every location with spiritual beings. Although ancient theoreticians sometimes tried to sort these beings into clear and distinct categories, most people were less certain about where to draw the line between demons, planets, stars, angels, cherubims, and so on. Thirdly, the spirit or soul of a dead person, especially those who had died by violent means or young, were thought to roam about in a restful or vengeful state near their body to the end of their natural lifespan. So kind of this idea of ghosts. So these gods show up in a multitude of ways. The first we have here is Persephone, who is the Greek queen of the underworld. She's the goddess of spring, fertility of vegetation. Hades, also known as Pluto in Rome, is the Greek god of the underworld who defeated the Titans. Now I want us to all keep in mind the characteristics as we go through these different gods, because they're going to play a key role as we develop the answer to this question in just a moment. Then we have Hermes, who is the messenger of gods. He's the god of tricksters. He's the intercessor between mortals and divine. And he is the protector of travelers, herdsmen, and thieves. Nemesis is the god of divine retribution, vengeful fate, and revenge. Moving over to Egypt, we have Osiris, who is the god of the afterlife, the underworld, and the dead. Set is the god of deserts, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners. So what do all of these gods tell us about the nature of ultimate reality in paganism? Well, it's polytheistic. They have a multitude of gods, and while in some groups they believed there was a supreme god, one who overarched them all, most of them were less concerned and worshipped many of the lesser gods as well. The characteristics of these gods are fickle or changeable or capricious. We see this with Hermes, who's the god of tricksters and thieves. Nemesis, who's the god of divine retribution and vengeful fate, or Set, the god of disorder and violence. They also have limited power both by location and by operation. So we have gods of Egypt, we have gods of Rome, gods of Greece and Mesopotamia. In addition to that, in their location, they're not supreme. They're gods of the desert or gods of the sun or gods of fertility. And so they have limited power both by location and operation. They're also impersonal. We never hear about the Greco-Roman or ancient gods wanting this personal relationship with mankind. We hear of occasional interactions between a divinity and a particular individual, but rarely do we see this overarching love for mankind and a desire to be personal with all humanity. Compare this to the Christian worldview. We're monotheistic. We believe there is only one God, whose characteristics are unchanging. He's omnipotent, meaning he's all-powerful. He's omniscient, meaning he knows everything. He's omnipresent, meaning he is everywhere. He's personal, desiring a one-on-one relationship with all of mankind. And he's infinite and timeless, meaning he existed for all of eternity past and will exist for all of eternity future and existed outside of time. Very different ideas of ultimate reality. So what is the nature of material reality? Well, the first one we have here is Gaia. She is the Greek goddess of the earth. She emerged at creation along with the sea, air, and sky, and she is the great mother of all. She literally is the earth. Jupiter is next. He is the sky god. He is the chief deity of state religions, divine witness to oaths, symbolizes trust and justice. He literally is the sky. If we move over to Egypt, we have Re, or Ra, who is the sun god or creator. Next to him, we have Nut or Nuth, who is arching over mankind here, often depicted with stars on her body because she literally is the sky. So what does this tell us about material reality in paganism? Well, nature is a theophany. It's a manifestation of the divine. Therefore, the material is ultimate because it is God. This results in worship of the material rather than the creator of the material, and also makes the world chaotic because as the gods change their mind or become unhappy with a certain area or individual, you get natural disasters such as floods or droughts or hurricanes or whatever, because nature is subject to the whim of the gods. It's also temporal, meaning it was created at some point in the past, did not exist for all of eternity. Well, how does this compare to the Christian worldview? Well, in the Christian worldview, nature is the creation of God, and we worship the creator of the material rather than the material itself. We believe the world is in a fallen state. It was in a perfect state at some point in the past, but it's not currently where it used to be, and that it is maintained by God in order for it to continue in its present state. The only point in which we agree is that it's temporal, that it was created at some point in the past. What about human beings? Well, we're going to step through 3 creation narratives now, the first being the Egyptian creation narrative. Here we have Atum, who is a self-created deity, the first being to emerge from the darkness and endless watery abyss that existed before creation. He's a product of energy and matter contained in this chaos, and out of it he created his children, the first deities out of loneliness. He produced them from a sneeze, Shu, the first, the goddess of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. The brother and sister, curious about the primeval waters beyond them, went to explore and disappeared. Unable to bear the loss of his children, Atum sends out the fiery messenger, the Eye of Re, to find his children, and mankind is then created out of the happy tears that Atum sheds when his children return. So in this creation narrative, mankind is a happy accident. It was not intentional, and it's the result of an overflowing of Atum's joy. In the Greco-Roman creation narrative, Prometheus, who was a titan, had not fought with the other titans. So he was given the disfavorable task of creating mankind. He ended up liking his creation, mankind, more than any of the other gods he was involved with. And so a battle of kind of wills ensues between he and Zeus. Zeus then creates Pandora and her box of horrors. We've all heard of Pandora and Pandora's box, to torture mankind because of their curiosity and be some sort of like amusement for the gods. They're going to sit back and, as we sit back and watch the Olympics, they're going to sit back and watch the chaos kind of unfold. And so in this creation narrative, we see mankind is created for worship and amusement of the gods. In the Babylonian creation narrative, this is called the Enuma Elish. There's a divine conflict that is started because there are upper gods and there are lower gods, and the lower gods serve the upper gods. They get tired of doing this. They no longer want to perform these tasks, so they revolt, and there's a conflict. Tiamat, the mother goddess, is killed by Marduk, her son, and from her body the universe is created. From her co-conspirator's blood, mankind is created for the purpose of taking over the tasks the lesser gods no longer wish to perform. So here we see mankind as the result of bloodshed, and they're created for the purpose of labor for the gods. Well, what do these three creation narratives tell us about mankind? In paganism, we are a creation, but we're insignificant. We're created for the purpose of servitude, as happy accidents, or for the amusement of the gods. Compare this to Christianity, where humanity is a special creation. We're image bearers, and though we are fallen as a result of moral lapse in the past and continuing to do so, we are still loved by God. That idea of love does not exist between the mortal and the divine in the pagan culture. Every culture throughout history has recognized that there's war or famine, plague, murder, death, sickness, or natural disasters, and as a result, they want to know what has gone wrong. This is not the ideal set of circumstances. Well, in paganism, ultimately nothing has gone wrong because material is ultimate and at the whim of the divine. Ultimately, there is nothing wrong. This is all that there is. Therefore, misfortune, pain, and suffering are the result of a chaotic world, being a manifestation of the divine. It could be the result of a mischievous or angry God taking out his wrath on you. It could be the result of mistakenly not pleasing a particular God through cult practice or worship. Or, if you are unlucky enough to upset an individual, you could be cursed by another, and so your misfortune could be the result of magic. Compare this with Christianity, where what has gone wrong is that sin entered the world via transgression against God. Misfortune, pain, and suffering are the result of nature and humanity bearing the mark of the fallen state. What is the solution? The majority of our time will be spent in this category today because this is the most developed category in any worldview. In the ancient world, there was no discernible differentiation between religion and magic, for the gods of the religions are oftentimes found in magical inscriptions or elements, whereas we draw the distinction in modern times between religion and science and magic. This didn't exist in the ancient world. They were all one and the same. We're going to explore a couple parts of the solution in ancient paganism, which is magic, sacrifice, and ceremonial worship. The first god we have here is Thoth, the Egyptian god who maintains the universe, arbitrates godly disputes. He's the god of magic, writing, science, and the judge of the dead. Hecate, who is the Greek goddess of witchcraft, night, new moon, ghosts, and necromancy. On the far side, we have Kronos, who is accepting a child sacrifice in this image. He is a Titan. He is the father of Zeus and the patron of harvests. Next to him is Hermes, the messenger of the god. We spoke about him a little bit earlier, but he's the messenger of the gods, intercessor between mortals and the divine. All of these gods were involved in some form or fashion in magical worship or ceremonial worship. Typically, we see magic, however, through curse tablets. Curse tablets were created for the purpose of harming another or bringing about the object of your desire. So if you had something you wanted to win a horse race, or you wanted someone to fall in love with you, or you wanted an enemy gotten out of the way, curse tablets were your means of achieving this. Oftentimes they had mystical words, which were thought to be the language of the gods, in the sense that correct pronunciation was all that was required for these words to work. And so, in the sense that if I didn't know Greek, and you all did, and I correctly pronounced a Greek sentence to you, you guys would understand what I was saying, and even if I did not. And that was the power behind these words. The individuals didn't necessarily know what they meant, but they were thought to be the language of the demons. And so by correctly pronouncing them, you were directly speaking with the powers that could enact your curse. They often had deities associated with them. And because there were local experts, in the same way that you can go to a particular doctor or a pastor or whatever, in the same way they had local curse experts where you could go and commission a curse tablet. And so we see that they would use local customs and beliefs to pick the divinity associated with their curse tablet. So we can study curse tablets by different areas and understand who they worshipped, what they thought about these gods, and how they engaged these gods. There's typically 3 types of curse tablets. The first being a direct binding curse, which is designed to work through the force of the words. And no divinity was necessarily invoked in this, so when I say I bind X, the force of my words is what binds them. The second is a prayer formula, which is appealing to the supernatural for assistance. So Zeus, restrain so-and-so. I'm getting the divinity involved. The third is persuasive analogy. It's the desire for an individual to take on the characteristics of something. So as this lead that I write my curse on is cold and useless, so may so-and-so be cold and useless. That was kind of the idea. Oftentimes with curse tablets, we see figurines or special objects associated with them. In Egypt, we find wax images of enemies to be buried in the grave for harsh treatment by Osiris. In Greece, we have evidence of public binding ceremonies. We find figurines such as the individuals we see up here. We have a female on the far side and a male in 2 different images on the closer side here. We find images such as them made out of mud, clay, lead, and wax, and they were often found with a curse tablet. They, along with either hair or clothing, were thought to make present the individual you were cursing. So in the same way that you carry a photograph of your loved ones in your pocket or in your wallet, to make them present to you when you're away from them, the same idea is what we see here. By creating a figurine or having hair or clothing of an individual, you've now made them present for the purposes of the curse. These were actually associated with love curses, believe it or not. The hands and feet on both of them are bound. I don't know that I'd want that person to love me. But, and they have nails driven through them. Although we're not entirely certain what the purpose of the nails are, we think that it might be in the sense of nailing down or securing your curse, kind of making it a permanence to it. Curse tablets are often found around water, in rivers, seas, streams, or wells. If you had a love spell, it would be placed in the home of your target. If you desired gambling success, such as for your candidate to win a horse race, you'd bury it under the stadium floor. They're often found in sanctuaries of deities, but the most common place we find curse tablets is around the graves of those who died young or by violent means, because it was thought that their spirit or soul roamed about their body until the end of their natural lifespan, and they could either A, enact the curse for you in order to please the gods, or B, take your curse to the gods for them to enact. A secondary solution when it comes to paganism is sacrifice. We saw an earlier image of Kronos accepting a child sacrifice. Here we have Moloch, who is the Canaanite god most often associated with child sacrifice. We also have a smaller image on the closer side of a Babylonian cylindrical scroll representing child sacrifice. So if you desired victory over an adversary, the end of a famine, plague, or drought, these were probably done more corporately rather than individual. All you would have to do is perform a child sacrifice to achieve the object of your desire. It was thought to please the gods as part of a ceremonial worship. So what does this tell us about the solution in paganism? Well, we have to make the best out of life. Since this all that there is, since material is ultimate and ultimately nothing has gone wrong, you need to do what you need to do to make your life the best it can be. How do we do this? By manipulation of your surroundings for personal gain, either through magic in the form of curse tablets, or through placation of the gods via sacrifice, we saw with child sacrifice, or through ceremonial worship. But ultimately in paganism, human beings are the ones who bring about the solution, not the divine. Compare this to Christianity, where restoration of humanity's fallen state is done through Christ's death on the cross. Human acceptance and recognition of Jesus as Lord and Savior is all that's required by mankind. And so ultimately in Christianity, God brings about the solution. So we see a dichotomy here. Oftentimes it is argued that Christianity's dying and rising Savior story, that Jesus came, God incarnate, was born of a virgin, lived a perfect life, performed miracles, died on a cross, and was resurrected 3 days later. It's argued that we stole this from paganism. We're going to explore 5 pagan stories, hopefully really quickly, and we're going to see how similar they really are. These are thought to be the most similar to the Christian story. The first here is Osiris, who was torn to pieces and scattered by his brother Set. Isis gathered the pieces, gave them to an Egyptian embalmer, and Osiris was resurrected. So some key differences we see here is that he is a created being who is elevated to God status rather than being God coming down and incarnating himself. He is torn to pieces by a brother, and he is resurrected as God of the underworld in a spiritual resurrection rather than the bodily resurrection we see in the New Testament. Next is Dionysus, who is placed in Semele's womb until she is burned to death by Zeus. The baby is then saved and sewn into Zeus's thigh, where he's born a second time. The key difference we see here is this is actually not really a resurrection account, but if you want to call it that, he's resurrected as a baby, not as a man. Adonis is born in the same cave of Bethlehem where Jesus was later born. He was a shepherd responsible for the lamb's milk. He called himself a healer. He saved people from death, was married to Inanna, and he was killed by robbers from the underworld who wanted to take his sheep. Inanna and the demons brought him back from the underworld. So the key differences we see here are that he is killed in order to steal his sheep rather than the redemption of mankind, and he is resurrected by demonic powers rather than by God himself. Next up is Attis, who is condemned to death at birth by his grandfather. He's left by a river to die, but is rescued by a shepherd. Now this is interesting. He eventually emasculates himself for his betrayal of his mother with her male self and dies. His mother resurrects him 3 days later and proclaims him her daughter and her lover. He is called the Good Shepherd and Savior of humanity. So some major differences in this story. He kills himself by emasculation for sexual betrayal. Nothing like the crucifixion story. And he is resurrected as a woman, not a man, to become the daughter and lover of his mother. So very, very different stories here. And the last one we're going to cover is Krishna. Some say that he was crucified, died, and resurrected 1,200 years before Christ, but the real story goes that he was killed by an arrow from a hunter, which accidentally shot him in the heel. He then died and ascended, and there is no reference to his resurrection. So this sounds a lot more like the Greek story of Achilles than the Jesus story we see in the Gospels. Also, Krishna was not a historical person. We have no records of him that are historical documents. He was the 8th incarnation or avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. All of these stories are missing a mortal birth. They are all individuals that are one of many gods rather than the God incarnate himself. There is no discussion of sacrifice for our sins, no discussion of unconditional love, no offer of eternal grace. So all of these stories are very, very different than what we see in the dying and rising Savior story in the Gospels. Our last question is, what happens to a person at death? Every culture wants to understand what happens at death. It's this kind of scary, unknown area. And so we want to know what happens when we leave the world. Well, in paganism, there's a very vague and ambiguous understanding of the afterlife. People depart to some sort of shadowy existence on the other side. In the Greco-Roman world, there's a discussion of a boat keeper who will take you to the other side, but what happens on the other side, no one really knows. In the Egyptian story, the Pharaoh's heart can be weighed against a feather, and if it is too heavy, then he will roam for eternity in this kind of restless state, or he can go to some sort of paradise if it's too light. But what happens to modern and a normal man isn't really defined. In some stories, there's a particular place or location individuals go, but what that looks like, what it will be like, is not fully fleshed out. As we discussed before, those who die early or by violent means are thought to be stuck as ghosts almost around their grave until the end of their natural lifespan. And there is no idea of judgment in paganism. So there's no heaven or hell, divine judgment for your life here on earth. Compared to the Christian worldview, where those accepting redemption live in eternity in God's presence. Those rejecting redemption live for eternity apart from God's presence. There is definitely a divine judgment. There's a heaven, which is described as a beautiful place where there's no suffering, no more tears, where you will be welcomed in with a wedding banquet, where there will be a bodily resurrection one day where we will reign, those who accept Christ will reign with Christ on earth, that the earth will be replaced, there will be a new heavens and a new earth. So there's a rather fleshed out picture in the scriptures of the place of the righteous after death, as well as the place of hell. It's depicted with continued defiance against God, a place of fire, of no hope, and of rebellion. So we understand, although we don't have a snapshot, we understand what kind of awaits those who accept or reject Christ in the afterlife. While Druids, the Voodoo, Wicca, witchcraft are all have existed as religious systems in America in many fashions throughout modern culture, they have earned the title of neo-paganism due to the resurgence of interest in ancient pagan practices. But I would like to argue that neo-paganism is actually a lot more influential and a lot larger than just those small individual groups. Our modern pop culture displays degrees of pagan influence. While they're not fully fleshed out as religious systems, much in our pop culture points to confusion as a society on all the worldview questions. It also points to an overarching pagan worldview or influence. So how is this resurfacing? While we don't necessarily worship or believe that they are gods or even necessarily that they are real, as John Mark Reynolds says, your art is a thermometer for your culture, and this is our art, our movies. There's a significant interest in, we see through the X-Men movies, as well as the Fantastic Four, an interest in mutant humans, people that are greater than ourselves, which sound a lot like the deities of old. Hercules, the human-characterized gods such as Zeus and Osiris. So these superhumans that have human characteristics but aren't human. They are greater than us. We also see that through the Superman movies, the idea that we want someone outside of ourselves, outside of our world, with supernatural powers to come in and rescue us. There's also a major interest in Greco-Roman mythology, as we see through the Immortals movies and the Clash of the Titans. So we have this desire as a culture for someone greater than ourselves. However, culturally, we do not desire a supreme, ultimate being. This is similar to ancient pagans. The ancients desired supernatural beings in order to blame and explain the chaos of this world. Yet in modern times, we desire super beings greater than ourselves to save us from the chaos of this world. We feel that things are out of control, and rationalism has taken the idea of a supreme deity from most of our culture, and so we're looking for something greater than us, even if we're not willing to concede a one true God. We're looking for something that will elevate us and rescue us. Material. What is the nature of material reality? Well, material is ultimate. This shows up in one of two ways. The more scientific version is naturalism. The more spiritualized version, if you're not into science, is the idea of Mother Nature. Both of these are two sides of the same coin when it comes to pagan worldview. Nature is, in both of these worldviews, nature is alive, and it brings about either by, in the scientific category, natural laws, or through the spiritual category through fatalistic processes. So nature is alive and brings about either by natural laws or by fatalistic processes all that is and ever will be. In ancient times, the pagans desired material to be ultimate because it explained the chaos around them. If the material was God, then it makes sense why things are chaotic. As the gods change their mind, the world changes. In modern times, we don't want to relinquish power to one almighty moral judge. And because of that, we don't want to be accountable. And this is why we've elevated material to the ultimate status. Then we're not accountable to anyone. How about humanity? In modern culture, humanity is insignificant. Pop culture praises appearance and material worth. We are only as good as our contribution to society. An unborn child is only as important as the value the mother sees, and therefore we allow abortion. A handicapped or deformed child is only as valuable as their future contribution to society, so we allow infanticide. An old person or a sick person is only as valuable as their ability to get well and continue to contribute, so we allow euthanasia. I'm teaching an ethics class now, and it was an interesting quote that I'm going to read to you guys that it says that no longer can we believe that mankind is created in the image of God. Mankind no longer has intrinsic moral value by being born as part of the human race. There is no more intrinsic moral obligation to a human being because they are born in the human race than we have to a pig or a dog. Such a view that human beings and that human species is different or greater than the rest of the species on the world is speciesist, meaning we are being superiorists when it comes to species, in the way that white supremacists were racist against other races. So this is what we believe about humanity as a culture, not necessarily in the church, but as a culture. Because material is ultimate and mankind is ultimately a higher evolution of mammals, mankind is not a special creation by God. Humans are no more valuable than their contribution to society as a whole, and therefore humanity ultimately is insignificant. We see this as just a resurgence of the pagan idea. So what has gone wrong? Ultimately, nothing has gone wrong in modern culture because material is ultimate. So this is all that there is. It can't get any better or worse necessarily. As a result, the solution is to make the best out of life. How do we do this? Just like with the pagans, a personal attempt to manipulate our surroundings. While magic is considered more on the outskirts of society typically today, it has become more popular. I've noticed a lot in the last couple years of interest in witchcraft in our movies. The Harry Potter movies, I think, kind of blazed that one in. And then this last year, American Horror Story had their whole focus for the entire season on witchcrafts, American Horror Story Coven. So the idea of magic is starting to bleed more and more into acceptable modern society. We believe that your problems will go away if you are thinner, more muscular, have a better physical appearance, so let's go get plastic surgery, make more money, get rid of your irritating spouse, are free to express yourself sexually with whomever and whatever you like. So we see rampant sexual freedom and divorce. And these are all our ideas of the solution of life. Things will be better if I just X. Since nothing is ultimately wrong because material is ultimate, the best we can hope for is to make the best out of our own life. We see a pagan fatalism that leads to the idea that the solution is in human hands. Whoops. And our last question, what happens at death? In our modern movies, while I'm not arguing anybody believes zombies are a real thing, we see there's a vague and ambiguous idea of the afterlife. We're very confused about what happens when we die. While as a culture we were once guided by Christian principles, we believe there was a judgment, a heaven or a hell. Our movies are working out this idea of what happens when we die. Do we float around as ghosts for some undeterminate time here on earth haunting people? Do we come back to life? So these are not necessarily ultimate expressions. Nobody necessarily believes this is definitely what's going to happen. But we can see through our movies that culture is confused and they're trying to figure out what's going on. They no longer buy into the Christian view of life after death. How did the early church respond? Well, they educated their people. They taught the lower classes to read and to write, and they taught them correct doctrine and how to correct inaccurate doctrine. We need to do this today. We need to make sure that people know what they believe and why they believe it. They provided a systematic set of beliefs and a staunch hold to truth. This is why we see all the councils on heresy. This is why we see the creeds, because the creeds were succinct ways of understanding and remembering what you believed. You could easily memorize them and recite them so people could run outside influences through this filter and know whether it was Christian or not. We need to bring that back into modern culture. It was a grassroots movement. While not an official formal movement, the idea that the church clergy or the pastor was responsible for evangelizing people was a completely foreign concept. Everybody went out and shared their faith. They talked to their family, their friends, their coworkers. They went out and made the movement themselves. They also met people where they were and by taking care of the less fortunate, the widows, the orphans, the poor. They dialogued on intellectual levels. We see that in Justin the Martyr's documents when he's talking about his apologies to the Greco-Roman world, trying to explain why we're not cannibals or we're not, incestuous, what Christianity can bring to the Roman Empire. We also see that in the dialogue with Trypho that Justin the Martyr writes, which is a discussion, an apologetic, if you will, with the Judaic culture and the Judaic religion. He's trying to dialogue and get them to understand why Christianity is an extension of Judaism. And so they met people intellectually and materially where they were. We need to bring all of this back into modern culture. We need to make sure people can not only read and write, which has actually started to be on a decline in modern culture, but also that they know their doctrine. There's an interest modernly in allowing ourselves to kind of blend with other cultures. We don't want to hold too tightly to truth because then we might seem like a bigot. So let me just kind of water down Christianity enough so that I can dialogue with my neighbors. The problem with that is if we water down our faith, there's no reason to convert. If we're no different than the pagans, why are we bothering to share Christ with them? Why do they need to come over to Christianity? But we always need to remember, as Ephesians 6:12 says, our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in this heavenly place. These individuals are engaging in these worldviews because it is satisfying something in them. They have had some sort of spiritual encounter that led them to believe that they're interacting with the divine. They've had some sort of situation where the ends appear to be the result of the means. And so we need to be sensitive to the needs that these worldviews are trying to meet and use that to bridge the gap in how Christ and the cross and Christianity can answer and satisfy that need better than their current system. That means we're going to do a lot of listening and a lot less talking. I hope that the information that you gather today, while most individuals will not self-identify with paganism, they're not going to come up and say, hi, I'm a pagan in the same way that you'd say, hi, I'm a Christian. You can ask them these questions and kind of figure out where they stand when it comes to this worldview. So I would hope that you would use this information we've gathered today to understand how you can navigate those waters with an individual and dialogue and show kind of a comparison between what they actually believe and what Christianity can offer. Because there's a lot of confusion thinking that we are very similar when in reality we are not. While some will self-associate with the idea of Druids and Wicca and Voodoo, many will not. And so to go up and call somebody a pagan is going to end the conversation instantly. And so I hope that we'll put a large focus and emphasis on bridging the gap between between Christianity and modern paganism, and also that we will hold staunchly to truth in that dialogue. All right, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you.